You know, there are some names in African history that you can't say quietly. The moment it leaves your lips, it echoes, loud, commanding, and dripping with legacy. You could be in Accra, Kampala, or even Cairo, and the reaction would be the same. Everyone stops and listens. Because that name, just that one name, carries weight. It carries hope, pride, controversy, and a touch of tragedy. And today, we're talking about one of those names. A man who wanted to drag an entire continent into modernity, whether it was ready or not. A man whose story is as inspiring as it is complicated. A man who was either a savior or a tyrant, depending on who you ask. He was born in a small village in Ghana called Nkrumah, and if you'd met him as a young boy, you probably wouldn't have guessed that this kid, this quiet, curious boy, would one day stand on the steps of history shouting, "Forward ever, backward never." He wasn't born into wealth or royalty. He was born into a colonial Gold Coast, where opportunity was as rare as a kind colonial governor. But even as a child, he had ambition burning inside him like a bonfire in the Harmattan. And let's just say, if motivation had a face, it might have looked like young Kwame. He went through Akamoto School, one of the most prestigious institutions at the time, where he met minds that would later become part of Ghana's independence struggle. But the young man wasn't done with learning. Oh no, Ghana was too small for his dreams. So he packed up and left for London, and later the United States, where he attended Lincoln University. Now imagine this. You're in your 20s, far from home, in a country where your accent and your skin make you a curiosity. Most people would blend in quietly and just get their degree, but not this guy. He got his degree and became an activist, rubbing shoulders with revolutionaries and black intellectuals who were dreaming about liberating Africa from colonial rule. By the time he returned to the Gold Coast, he wasn't just a man with a diploma. He was a man with a mission. And when the United Gold Coast Convention, UGCC, invited him to be their general secretary, they probably didn't realize what kind of fire they were bringing into the house. You see, the UGCC was like that polite student union that holds meetings and drinks tea while writing resolutions no one reads. Nkrumah showed up and said, "Forget tea, where are the masses?"
Oh my.
He gave the party a flag, offices, and a nationwide presence. Suddenly, the ordinary Ghanaian, farmers, traders, laborers, were chanting his name. But, like every great story, this one comes with a twist. Nkrumah realized he couldn't fully push his radical ideas within the UGCC's conservative walls. So he left. And he didn't just leave quietly. He formed his own movement, the Convention People's Party, the CPP. And that's when things really got interesting. The rallies grew bigger, the chants louder. Self-government now wasn't just a slogan, it was a thunderclap across the Gold Coast. The colonial government panicked, locked him up, and thought they had silenced him. But here's the funny part. The more they tried to suppress Nkrumah, the more popular he became. From prison, he was running campaigns. From behind bars, he won elections. And in 1957, Ghana, formerly the Gold Coast, became the first sub-Saharan African country to gain independence. It was a historic moment. The drums, the flags, the dancing, it was more than celebration. It was the birth of African self-rule. And standing at the center of it all was Nkrumah, the man who had made the impossible possible. But every visionary walks a tightrope between genius and catastrophe. Once independence came, Nkrumah didn't slow down. In fact, he sped up. His eyes weren't just on Ghana anymore, they were on Africa. He wanted a united continent, one government, one army, one voice. Lofty? Absolutely. Impossible? Maybe. But he believed it could happen. Back home, he launched an ambitious program of industrialization. He wanted to turn Ghana into an economic powerhouse, a place where factories would hum, farms would flourish, and everyone would share in prosperity. There were tomato factories, meat factories, shoe factories, and state farms sprouting everywhere. The only problem? Most of them didn't exactly work. Ghana's economy began to crumble under the weight of rapid industrialization. While Nkrumah was busy financing liberation struggles in other African countries, sending money, weapons, and moral support, the home front was collapsing. Prices were rising, people were frustrated, and the once adored leader was becoming more isolated. He surrounded himself with yes-men who told him what he wanted to hear, not what he needed to hear. Paranoia set in after multiple assassination attempts, and he introduced the Preventive Detention Act, a law that allowed him to imprison anyone he thought might be plotting against him. At that point, the love people had for him started turning into fear. The socialist dream was cracking, and the reality of an unstable economy was sinking in. Then came 1966, the year everything fell apart. Nkrumah, against the advice of his closest advisors, left Ghana for a peace mission to Hanoi. Everyone could see the writing on the wall, tensions were high, the military was restless, but he insisted on going. And just 2 days after he left, the coup happened. He never returned to power again. He lived his final years in Guinea, still dreaming of a united Africa, still believing in the cause that had defined his life. And that was the story of a man who dreamed so big, even his failures made history. Now let's talk about the book that tells this story. This fascinating account comes from Kwame Nkrumah, Vision and Tragedy by David Rooney. This isn't your typical biography that glorifies its subject. No, Rooney takes a historian's scalpel and dissects Nkrumah's life from Nkrumah to Guinea, from student to statesman, from hero to exile. It's both a celebration and an examination, a blend of admiration and criticism. The chapters titled Socialist State, Foreign Policy, and Denouement are particularly revealing. Rooney delves deep into the ideological and political labyrinth of Nkrumah's rule, his belief in scientific socialism, his obsession with Pan-African unity, and the events that hardened his anti-Western stance, especially after the murder of Patrice Lumumba and the CIA's involvement in African politics. But as insightful as the book is, it's not without its problems. Many of Rooney's sources come from the military regime that overthrew Nkrumah, a government with every reason to tarnish his legacy. So while the book offers incredible detail, it must be read with skepticism. For instance, Rooney claims that many of Nkrumah's books weren't actually written by him. That's a big accusation, and one that feels, frankly, too convenient. He also downplays Nkrumah's role in founding the Organization of African Unity, suggesting it was Emperor Haile Selassie who made it happen. Again, possible, but debatable. And perhaps the most telling omission is how lightly the book treats colonialism. Reading it, you'd think the colonial period was just a polite misunderstanding between friends. There's little acknowledgement of the exploitation that made independence movements necessary in the first place. Still, Rooney deserves credit for presenting Nkrumah as a man, not a myth. He captures the contradictions, the leader who championed freedom yet silenced dissent, the visionary who built factories that stood empty, the socialist who became isolated in a palace of marble and fear. But here's what stands out to me most. Despite everything, his flaws, his paranoia, his missteps, Nkrumah's dream for Africa remains unmatched. Over 50 years later, we're still talking about African unity, economic independence, and an African high command, ideas that started with him. This book may not always do him justice, but it reminds us that history is never neat. It's messy, complicated, and full of bias. Rooney gives us one version of the story. The rest, as readers, we must piece together ourselves. And before I forget, there's a fun little trivia bit from the book. Do you know the word awam? which means fake or deceptive in Ghanaian slang. It actually comes from Nkrumah's era. It's an acronym, Association of West African Merchants, AWAM, a group of Lebanese and Syrian traders accused of cheating the public with inflated prices. Imagine a political era so influential, even the slang outlived the policies. So, what do I think of the book overall? It's an informative and readable account, but it's not the final word. It paints Nkrumah with broad, often harsh strokes, yet it still gives us valuable insight into the man behind the movement. I'd recommend it to anyone curious about Ghana's history or Africa's political evolution, but only as a starting point. Read this and read others. Compare, contrast, and draw your own conclusions. Because Kwame Nkrumah's story, his vision and his tragedy, can't be contained in one book. If you enjoyed this review, don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into Africa's greatest literary and historical works. I'll see you in the next one. Forward ever, backward never. Hey, thanks so much for hanging out with me today. If you're interested in diving deeper into this book, I've left some links down in the description. You can use it to grab yourself a copy and keep the adventure going. And if you're in the mood for more great reads, don't go just yet. Click on one of the videos popping up right now that I think you'll love. And don't forget to give this review a like, leave a comment, or even subscribe if you'd like to see more. Every bit of support helps us grow this little community of book lovers. See you in the next one.